Hi, I'm Ali and a warm welcome to the Ceramic Repair Studio. So in today's video I thought I would do a second part on this jug here. The first part we actually fixed a chip in with some Milliput, and so now today we're going to do a little bit of sanding and some hand painting just so we can fill this in and so it's ready to go. So what we're going to do first is we're going to do some sanding. Now what I like to use is different types of grades of sandpaper. I tend to cut them off and use small pieces. So starting off with a slightly coarser grade, let's take some here. You just want to get to your item and you want to actually make sure that when you're sanding you're going from the original towards the Milliput, and you want to go nice fairly light and just keep sanding away. If you actually keep going backwards and forwards you will end up with a ridge, so you just want to be quite mindful to go backwards and forwards. And obviously if you've applied quite a lot of product it's going to take more time to actually sort of sand along here. And then once you've done that you want to work to a slightly lighter grade. So I've got another lighter grade, here we are, there's a lighter grade here. And then again start to sand heading towards the Milliput from the original. Now obviously you are going to mark a little bit from either side, that's fine, as long as you're not overdoing it and it's sort of blending in, but try not to be too close to where the original is. And then keep sanding on the other side as well. And what you want to do is you just want to keep going along the grades until it's nice and smooth. And then another grade lower. So here we go, here's another grade here. Here we go, here's another grade lower here. And then you just want to keep going along. Now you'll know when it's ready for painting because you won't have a ridge. So you want to make sure once you think you're almost there, if you can take your finger, hopefully preferably clean, and just if you can close your eyes and then just very gently glide along with your finger, you'll be able to really tell if you have a ridge or not, and if you need to do more work with your sandpapering to really get it nice and smooth. So obviously if it's smooth, it's not going to show any ridges. So just a little bit more here, and on this side here. Almost there. Feeling pretty good. So what I like to finish off with the sandpaper is one called Micro Mesh here, and this is literally a fabric sandpaper, well sort of fabric based if you like, and you can't cut this up, so you just keep it as a square if you like. And I just like to finish off with this because it really does, it's so fine, it almost makes it feel like glass at the end. So again, just really give that a nice sand. And on the other side as well. So once we've sanded that and we've done the touch test if you like, and it's nice and smooth, we're now ready for painting. Now, when it comes to painting items, hand painting, I use a variety of different types of paint. So this is an ivory black, for instance, and here we have a raw umber. They're quite my go-to colours. As you can see, they're well and truly worn, and a little bit goes a very long way. And these are powder pigments. But I also use, and I love using, Winsor & Newton, the professional range. Using the professional range you get a really good hue, and I do find the colours better, slightly deeper if you like. So this one is my go-to white, which tends to be a titanium white. And you can actually mix them together. Obviously, mixing some acrylic is so much easier than using powder pigment, as you've got to make sure that you've actually dissolved all the powder, otherwise you end up with bits of gloopy bits, particularly if you're going through an airbrush. If it gets clogged, you've had it, you've got to start from scratch. So apart from that, I like to also collect little what am I going to say here? I'm almost saying say toothpicks here, but anyway, so if you can collect these as well, these are really useful for mixing in paint and also glue as well. So little cocktail sticks there, and we also have a nice range of brushes. Now the brushes I tend to use tend to be more of a sable brush. I do like the sable brushes because you get a smoother finish. You don't tend to have so many brush marks, but you know, whatever you prefer. And I also like to use, let me see if I've got one here, a flat brush, particularly at the end when we're doing some, let's see if I can find one, if we're doing glazing. So I've got a large flat brush there, that's a bit large. So one, for instance, we have a flat brush here, and I would tend to use that to glaze because you can glaze very quickly, and so you're not because the glaze dries very fast. If you keep going over, you will end up with brush marks. So by having a flat brush and going just once or twice, you tend to get a better glaze, and it tends to not look so, you don't end up with bristle marks, if you like. And finally, we've also got some ceramic glaze. Now this is a Rustin's glaze. Little bit goes an awful long way, so I tend to place bits into a jar, and then just keep using the jar until it's finished. Then I'll put the Rustin's back into the jar, just a bit at a time, because otherwise it will dry out and it's quite expensive. Now, if you can't get hold of this, there is another product I believe is very similar, and that's readily available on Amazon. So I will leave something in the description box, and that's one again made by the same company as this paint. So it's the Winsor & Newton one, ceramic glaze. And then also we need some water here, so a cup of water just to sort of rinse our brushes and to add a bit of water into our paint. Right, so sorry, it's my brush I've just dropped. So what we need to do first is we're going to start with the lighter colour here. So I'm going to use some white acrylics, and you just want to apply it just a little bit into a bottle top. I'm always collecting bottle tops, they're so useful again for mixing paint and everything, and also glue. Again, always ending up on my fingers. I'm probably one of the messiest china ceramic repair people. Anyway, so once we've done that, I'm now going to take where are we? Take one of our brushes, and let's decide which brush we're going to use. And I'd probably use it's quite a fine one, this one, so I'd probably go for a very small brush, probably this brush here, because the area here is very, very fine, so we can actually just get right in there. So we're going to add, with the white paint here, some water, and we'll place some of the white to the side because we can always add a little bit or two at the end. We don't need very much. Just make sure that's nice. That's it, and dispersed. And then we're going to add a little bit of this. This is the raw umber here. So this is where a cocktail stick comes in quite useful. And then you just want to apply just a little bit into our lid here. And then just mix a little bit in. And we'll keep going through with that. Now, when you think you've roughly got the colour, this is when I like to add a little bit of the Rustin's ceramic glaze, because it would just really hold the paint in whilst it's drying. So I will then take my jar here, and then let's get a fresh cocktail stick here, and then just apply some of the glaze into our lid here, and then just quickly close up because, as I say, it does dry quickly, and then just give that a little mix. So you can do a little practice run, and if it's not exactly the same colour, you can keep going through until you do get the right colour hue. It's really difficult trying to find the right colour to begin with. And then just very slowly start to paint. If it's too watery, you will find that you will it's not going to have too much coverage, so you may have to keep going back. But if you can just start to paint on the right bits there. Again, you don't want to go too thick, so it's just kind of blending in here. And we can always come back and do another little going over as well if it's not enough. Meanwhile, while that's just drying, let's mix up this colour, this sort of browny colour here. Actually, I'll just add a little bit more in there before I finish, so go over just a tiny bit. Right, so while that's drying, mix the water in. A bit of kitchen roll is always useful as well. So with this colour, this is slightly darker. So again, taking another lid here, we're going to add a little bit, tiny bit of white, but not very much. Just as a little base. Just placing it on the side of the lid. It's the only thing with, when you do have acrylics, it does get slightly more messier. End up with everywhere. Right, and then we're going to take some of the brown, and then we're going to add a little bit of the black. So taking our previous cocktail stick, let's add a bit of brown on the side there. And then let's just add a little bit of water in. First of all with the white, and then combining a little bit of the brown in as well. Again, you want to make sure that the powder pigment is completely dissolved. And then we're going to, I might add just a tiny bit more brown. I've still got some more brown from the previous, so I just add a bit of that in. So it's slightly darker. And then we want to add a tiny little bit of black, just a smidge. As I say, it really is trial and error. You just got to keep going through. Just a tiny bit of black. Again, I like to put it at the side and add two. So just taking a little bit of the black from the side and adding it to the colour. That's pretty good. And then when you think you've roughly got the colour, we're then going to add in a tiny little bit of the ceramic glaze here. Let's take another underside part there. Again, you don't need that much. And then you just want to mix. Again, we can keep going backwards and forwards and getting the colour right, the combination. So let's see how that is. It might be a bit light, but it's a good starting point. So just blending through. And then just blend through on the rest. Because it's white, it's obviously quite a strong colour, so it's going to take a few goes to go over this. And just leave that for a second. And then we'll go back to our lighter colour here. So taking our lighter colour. A little bit more of the dark. Again, because it's hand painted, there's lots of different tones. So it's starting to come together now. I can see it's got a little rim of brown in there as well, which we can go back to afterwards. Might add a little bit more tone with the brown. And just slowly start to build up. So you can see it's starting to blend through a bit now. Yeah, when it comes to sort of naive pieces of pottery, they're so much easier to blend in. Whereas if you have a piece of, say, porcelain, it can be slightly more tricky. And obviously, if you're using an airbrush, obviously that tends to be very good on porcelain and on larger items. But personally, I prefer doing hand painting. It's a lot more fun and creative. So again, just taking our slightly darker brown colour here, just mixed in a little bit more of the ceramic glaze to just really lock that in better. And then again, just going over. Blending in with the rest. See, it's got one or two little darker patches, so just going to add a little bit more black. Yeah, so with that lighter brown as well, I just want to, I can see there's a little rim which could do with very, very light. There we go, a little bit darker there, so just moving that across. And what I like about sable brushes is that you do tend to get a better point as well. So once you're fairly happy and we've got our colour together, we're then going to take, once it's dry, and because it's very fine and I haven't done too much over painting, just leaving it kind of rustic, we then just do a final glaze. So what you need to do is take the ceramic glaze here And again, personally, I like to use a flat brush for this. So sorts of flat brushes, that's a fairly good one. This has been used quite a lot, but you want a good edge. So let's use this one here. So we want to take, whoops, back on. Right, so sorry about that. I've actually got a new telephone, and so because it doesn't actually quite fit the camera stand, so obviously now and again it comes off. So, and I can't, because I'm auto dubbed, I find it really tricky to take things out. So it is what it is. Right, so once we've done that, we're then going to take our ceramic glaze again. And so from our jar, keeping it real, just want to take a little bit of the glaze here. Now you don't want too much, otherwise it will go, as I said before, it will end up going sort of streaky, and you want to be fairly quick with this. I will place some of it into another pot here, so we can always add a little bit more afterwards if need be. And then coming along where our original is here, you just want to blend it through, and you want to be fairly quick. If you keep going over, you will end up with marks. So that was it. We just literally went through. If you do have an item which isn't so shiny, if you add a tiny bit of water to the ceramic glaze, it tends to dull down a bit. So that's always quite a good tip as well, if you have something which is not so shiny and more matte, if you like. So there we are. This will be ready now. The ceramic glaze doesn't take very long, probably 10 minutes, and it's literally dry. Now, with the ceramic glaze, this was only a small chip, so obviously we can still use our jug. But obviously if you're using it on a rim, you do need to have a look at the directions, manufacturer's instructions, to see if it's actually food safe. Obviously if you're using a rim, or if it's on a cup with a rim and you're drinking from it. Now you don't need to use any oven for this. It just dries and then it's done. I won't say it's waterproof, but if you do have a crack, for instance, which has gone through, if you do use the ceramic glaze a few times, it does tend to stop any water from coming through, but obviously that's for another video. But for just today, because we filled the crack in, we've sanded, we've painted, and we've just placed the glaze on. So I'm going to tip it upside down just so it's just drying. Takes, as I say, 10 minutes, but I like to leave it, for a good 12 hours to really make sure it's, really dry. So I hope you enjoyed today's video and all the things which go on. As I say, that's my life. It's quite hectic, but I love it. And I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you're not already subscribed, please consider subscribing for more content. And I really look forward to seeing you in the next video. Okay, bye.